Noam Chomsky exposed as a Russian asset. Say it ain't so, Noam. Also, Vin defends Zelensky. Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
And you ain't black.
The first time ever any...
What are you people?
We're Americans. We are Americans indeed. How goes it, dear listener? My name is Vincent. My partner in crime is off doing wonderful things in the world, and we are Middle America. Sadie Douglas is first. And in a first, we will be defending Volodymyr Zelensky in this episode, inshallah. Okay, dear listener, what's the deal with Middle America? The deal with Middle America is very, very simple. Middle America, initially, we naively went into this a couple years ago saying, oh, we're just going to get the middle road between, left wing, right wing, whatever, because on some issues I'm left, some issues I'm right, etc. And then something very amazing has happened, and that has been the fact that I have come to the conclusion that our media apparati, traditional media and social media combined, have been co-opted by a very small group of folks in the government and the economic sector that then those folks believe that they can quell our speech and silence us in order to stymie fake news. And of course, everybody knows that fake news is a problem, and all of us are against fake news, dear listener. The problem is that the solution that a few of these oligarchs have designed. Now, I'm going to try to stop using the term oligarch. Good night. Everybody's using the term oligarch now. But anyway, shout out to John Kemper in the house. Gang. The term, the methodology that these ultra-rich folks have designed to quell, quote, fake news is simply to deplatform everybody that goes against the media narrative. Now, dear listener, I'm very concerned about fake news, but I'm more concerned about tyranny. I do not believe deplatforming people and silencing speech is the way forward. What I believe actually is the way forward to combat fake news is actually very simple. We take the stories, put them on the table, all look at them, all discuss them, and if we have disagreements, as you can see on the trailer here, you can call in. And inshallah, as my Muslim friends say, that the truth will become plain from error. I think that is probably the best way and the most democratic way to ascertain the truth in these days and times. So the format of this show, dear listeners, is actually very simple. We get a story, we report on the story, we talk about the story. Your brother gives his interpretation of the events and what should be done. And then if somebody disagrees, we put the clock up for 5 minutes and somebody can call in. And then we call in, have a discussion, then we go to the next topic. That's the format of the show. And Benji's is cracking on y'all. I love the official narrative and I support our elected officials and wealthy business people without question. Sadaqt. Okay, now, some of you are heartbroken at the revelation that our dear brother, Mr. Noam Chomsky, has revealed himself recently to be a Russian asset, dear listener. Yes, because as you know, anyone that doesn't take the party line relative to what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, is obviously a Russian asset. Having said that, let's check it out. This is Noam Chomsky. This is number one, this show is gonna be all over the place. We're probably gonna be around here for 2.5 hours. I'm gonna do this show before I go to the gym. Okay, so number one, this show is gonna be all over the place. I'm probably gonna break it up into 3 segments when we get done with the raw data. But number two, like I said, it's gonna be long. It's gonna be all over the place. Let's start. Mr. Chomsky did an interview recently with Jeremy Scahill, however you pronounce his name. He's a guy that did Dirty Wars, and he featured Anwar al-Awlaki and his family. He was the American that Mr. Obama drone bombed without trial in Yemen. And then we killed his son, Abdul Rahman, who was 16 years old. And then the baton got handed to Trump, who then killed his daughter in a DevGru raid, the first military action that Mr. Trump approved. Okay, Having said that, so this is Jeremy Scahill, whatever his name is, and he's interviewing the big homie Noam Chomsky. Now, the reason I got hold of this debate was discussion was actually because I was on leftist Twitter, and there was a whole host of weeping and gnashing of teeth because of this interview. So, having said that, dear listener, let's check it out. We're going to be here for a while. Noam Chomsky, Jeremy Scahill, whatever it is, let's do it.
Thank you very much for joining us here at The Intercept for this discussion with Professor Noam Chomsky. We're going to be discussing today the Russian government's invasion of Ukraine, the horrors that we've seen coming out of Ukraine, the bloodshed, the massacres, the killings, but also we are witnessing a major assertion of power by the United States in Europe, calls for expanding U.S. militarism in Europe, European governments pledging to spend more money on weapons systems and to increase their activities as arms brokers. The United States at present is the largest weapons dealer in the world. At the same time, our guest, Noam Chomsky.
We're the largest weapons dealer in the world. Please note that. That means, dear listener, according to the doctrine of supply and demand, that if you are an arms dealer, then your industry is jihad. It's war. And so you have a monetary incentive, a fiduciary incentive for wars to continue. Just putting that out there. We continue.
Says that this was an act of aggression, state-sponsored act of aggression that belongs in the history books alongside the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, as well as the 1939 invasion of Poland by both the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany.
Well, I mean, I disagree that Putin's invasion would be the equivalent of our invasion into Iraq. Number one, we did not confirm that there were actual weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There are weapons of mass destruction in Ukraine. Number two, Iraq is thousands of miles away. Ukraine borders Russia. So I disagree with the big homie there, but we continue.
I want to welcome Professor Noam Chomsky to this forum here on The Intercept. Noam, thank you very much for being with us.
Pleased to be with you.
I want to start because there's been a lot of discussion on the left in the United States among anti-war activists on how to make sense of what a just response would look like to Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine and the mass killing that we are seeing. We can take time to talk about the broader historical context, and you've been discussing this a lot in other interviews. But I want to just start by asking you, is there any aspect of the U.S., NATO, and European Union response to this invasion that you believe is just? The weapons transfers to Ukraine, the sweeping economic sanctions and attempts to entirely isolate not only Russia and Putin, but ordinary Russians. Is there any aspect of the government response to this by the US, NATO, or the European Union that you agree with?
That's an interesting question. I wonder how the homie's going to respond.
I think that support for Ukraine's effort to defend itself is legitimate. If it is, of course, it has to be carefully scaled so that it actually improves their situation and doesn't escalate the conflict to lead to destruction of Ukraine and possibly beyond. Sanctions against the aggressor are appropriate, just as sanctions against Washington would have been appropriate when it invaded Iraq or Afghanistan or many other cases. Of course, that's unthinkable given U.S. power. And in fact, the few times it has been done, the one time it has been done, the U.S. simply shrugged its soldiers and escalated the conflict.
That's what happens when you're in a global empire. You know, you do illegal invasions like what we did in Iraq. Somebody has the audacity to say, we need to levy sanctions. We need to levy sanctions against Americans. We go, what? We're going to escalate it. Now what? That's what happens when you're the lone superpower on the planet. We continue.
Was Nicaragua, when the U.S. was brought to the World Court, condemned for unlawful use of force, ordered to pay reparations, responded by escalating the conflict. But so it's unthinkable in the case of the U.S., but it would be appropriate. However, I still think it's not quite the right question. The right question is, what is the best thing to do to save Ukraine from a grim fate, from further destruction? And that's to move towards a negotiated settlement.
I was going to say, I was like, what did the brother say that was so bad? Number one, I guess people have a problem with him saying, in order for us not to destroy Ukraine, we need to get to a negotiated settlement. I guess that's what got my supposed left-wing friends in a tizzy.
There are some simple facts that aren't really controversial. There are two ways for a war to end. One way is for one side or the other to be basically destroyed, and the Russians are not going to be destroyed. So that means one way is for Ukraine to be destroyed. The other way is some negotiated settlement.
I mean, dear listener, the grim reality of the situation is that he's right. There's only two ways to end jihad. One is complete and total annihilation, and two is some sort of negotiated compromise or settlement. Those are the only two ways that we have figured out thus far to win wars. The Russians are not going to be destroyed by the Ukrainians, and Americans, therefore NATO, are not going to get hot with Russia and put boots on the ground. Russia is a nuclear power. Ukraine is not. So if you apply the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, we cancel one another out, meaning Russia and NATO, on a nuclear level. But the Russians can deal with the Ukrainians without having to resort to nukes because they have overwhelming power. So that being the case, the Russians are not going to be destroyed. Therefore, the only viable alternative is for the Ukrainians to come to a negotiated peace settlement with the Russians. That's just logic. Now, please note, I am not saying that that's good or fair. Let me say it this way. I'm not saying that that's fair. Okay? I'm not saying it's fair. What I'm saying is that is the only logical way out of this conflict the way it stands right now.
If there's a third way, no one's ever figured it out. So what we should be doing is devoting all the things you mentioned, if properly.
Alden says there is a third way, exactly what happened to Tsarist Russia during World War I. Please explicate that in the current historical context a bit further, because I agree with Noam, but I mean you may be right, but explicate that a little bit further. What you mean? What do you think is realistic in the modern context? We continue.
Shaped, but primarily moving towards possible negotiated settlement that will save Ukrainians from further disaster. That should be the prime focus. That requires we can't look into the minds of Vladimir Putin and the small clique around him. We can.
Well, you're right, Vin. Well, I mean, I'm right for agreeing with Noam Chomsky, I guess. The issue is that in a war, you can't not fight when the enemy is entering your territory in the meantime, especially if the demand is impossible to meet. That's untrue. You can simply negotiate for what's called a ceasefire. Look at the Israelis and the Palestinians all through the 90s. There were many intifadas that were set up, and then you had many ceasefires, little pockets of truces until you figure out what you're going to do as far as giving up land, etc., etc. So it's just not true that the only thing the Ukrainians can do is fight. There's a lot of options that they can use to start negotiating these settlements.
Speculate, but can't do much about it.
Here's Rob Hoyle. I see the mistake you're making. You're applying logic to Putin's mindset. There it is. He's just crazy. He's just a crazy megalomaniac. He's not operating rationally at all. I'm sorry. That makes no sense. Putin has not demonstrated anything on the stage of the world to indicate. I mean, how do I say this without disrespecting our country? But there are multiple leaders on the world stage who have clear mental degeneration that you could easily make a case for as far as this person doesn't operate by logic. But Vladimir Putin is not one of them. Vladimir Putin is incredibly lucid, speaks with intentionality, and argues with logic. Now, if you have a quote or a situation, Rob, where Vladimir Putin doesn't operate that way, I'd like to know it. But we can't reason with Putin. He's crazy, yada, yada, yada. I'm sorry, I disagree.
And, however, look at the United States, and we can see that our explicit policy, is rejection of any form of negotiations. The explicit policy goes way back, but it was given a definitive form in September 2021 in the September 1st Joint Policy Statement that was then reiterated and expanded in the November 10th Charter of Agreement. And if you look at what it says, basically says no negotiations. What it says is it calls for Ukraine to move towards what they called an enhanced program for entering NATO, which kills negotiations, increased sending of, this is before the invasion, notice, an increase in the dispatch of advanced weapons to Ukraine, more military training, joint military exercises, weapons placement.
Okay, so here is the, as he was talking, I googled what he was talking about. Here is what Noam Chomsky is referring to. It's unbelievable, guys. This is right from the whitehouse.gov website. This is absolutely crazy to me. 1 September 2021. So this was before the whole invasion, etc., etc. This is 1 September 2021. The United States welcomes Ukraine's continued progress on defense and defense industry reforms, including the adoption of a new defense industry strategy. That means they're buying a bunch of weapons from us, I'm sure. We intend to continue our robust training and exercise program in keeping with Ukraine's status as a NATO enhanced opportunities partner. Ukraine plans to continue taking steps to enhance democratic civilian control of the military. So when you say things like, whoa, man, it looks like there's a lot of Nazis over there in Ukraine with these civilian militias that are getting kind of co-opted. Oh, no. There it is. That's the United States' official policy, is to bring Ukraine closer to NATO as an enhanced opportunities partner and to continue to arm them and give them robust arms. And 3, to work with civilians, militias, Right Sector, Azov Battalion, C-14, etc., thereby pushing forward the likelihood of a hot war, which every single expert in the region said was going to happen if this continued. Ukraine plans to continue taking steps to enhance democratic civilian control of the military, reform the security service, and modernize its defense acquisition process. Defense acquisition, dear listener, is buying weapons from us. To advance its Euro-Atlantic aspirations, the United States supports Ukraine's plan to reform the security service of Ukraine by streamlining and clarifying its authorities and strengthening. So Noam Chomsky is talking about that specific briefing where we specifically said we're going to bring these people closer and closer to NATO. That's on the official website of the United States of America, 21 September in 2021. Okay, but we want to say, oh, this is all Vladimir Putin. He's crazy.
On the border, it's
unbelievable.
We can't be sure, but it's possible that these strong statements may have been a factor in leading Putin and his circle to move from warning to direct invasion. We don't know. But as long as that policy is guiding the United States, it's basically saying, quote Ambassador Chaz Freeman, it's saying, let's fight to the last Ukrainian.
Let's fight to the last Ukrainian. Anybody that knows anything about war knows that there's no way the Ukrainians are going to win this war. Never. Okay? So there's Chaz, one of our guys, saying we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Dear listener, I want you to see this. I want you to see this because this is unbelievable stuff here. Unbelievable stuff. So here is what America says. The United States does not and will never recognize Russia's purported annexation of Crimea and reaffirms its full support for international efforts, including the Normandy format, aimed at negotiating a diplomatic resolution to the Russian-led conflict in eastern Ukraine on the basis of international law. The United States supports Ukraine's efforts to use the Crimea platform to focus international attention on action, humanitarian security, etc., etc. Please note, dear listener, that in 2014, the Crimeans voted to be annexed by Russia because their governor specifically said, we do not want to be ruled by Nazis. So when our U.S. State Department publishes something that's literally on our website and says we're not going to recognize the annexation of Crimea, please note what they're saying is middle finger to all of you Crimeans who voted at a clip of 96% to be recognized as part of the Russian Federation because you were terrified once the right sector C-14 and Azov took over Ukraine in 2014. These are facts, dear listener. My point is our country knows. They know what is going to happen, but we're cool with it because we want to weaken Russia. Unbelievable.
Basically what it amounts to. So the questions you raised are important, interesting. Just what is the appropriate?
Al, the dichotomy between defensive weapons and offensive weapons is the Ukrainians have hypersonic weapons. They've got drones. What are you talking about? Al, do the Ukrainians have missiles that can reach Moscow, yes or no? You mean like defensively, the missiles can defensively reach Moscow? It's just a serious question. All the verbal engineering, I have a hard time with verbal engineering. I have a hard time when people use language that is meant to cover up obvious truths. My brother, do Ukrainians have the capability to send destruction to Moscow based on their support from NATO and the United States? It's a simple question. We continue.
Kind of military aid to give Ukrainians defending themselves, enough to defend themselves, but not to lead to an escalation that will just simply lead to massive destruction, and what kind of sanctions or other actions could be effective in deterring the aggressors. Those are all important, but they pale into insignificance in comparison with the primary need to move towards a negotiated settlement, which is the only alternative to destruction of Ukraine, which of course Russia is capable of carrying out.
You know, it's interesting because Volodymyr Zelensky has been really lionized, particularly in the U.S. and Western European media, and it's almost a sort of he's become a kind of caricature with these grand, sweeping historical comparisons, and often the quotes from him are intended to give the appearance of this defiant leader who is going to fight to the end. But when you read between the lines and you read what Ukrainian negotiators are saying, when you read what Zelensky says when pressed on conditions for peace, he seems to be extremely aware of the factors that you're citing, that this has to end in a negotiation. And I want to ask you about the role of the US and European media in sort of perpetuating this mythology around Zelensky, and the way in which it seems to kind of undermine the seriousness of the negotiators of Ukraine or of Zelensky.
I'm about to defend Mr. Zelensky pretty soon here because I actually feel pretty terrible for the guy, but it is true. I kind of cringe as an American, especially in the opening days of the war. The propaganda was insane. You had poor Zelensky dressed up like Captain America. They replaced the American flag on the shield with the Ukrainian flag. It was embarrassing to see that. Mr. Zelensky is an actor. He's a comedian. I do think he's a good guy. I just think he's in over his head, and I'll prove that to you guys very, very, very soon. But yeah, the lionization of Zelensky, the myth making, it's truly unfortunate. Really, really, really unfortunate. We continue.
Zelensky, when he is talking in a nuanced manner, it seems that there's this intent to kind of create a caricature rather than actually listening to the conditions that Ukraine is stating it can live with.
Yes, you're absolutely right. If you look at the media coverage, Zelensky's very clear, explicit, serious statements about what could be a political settlement, crucially neutralization of Ukraine, those have been literally suppressed for a long period, then sidelined in favor of heroic Winston Churchill impersonations by congressmen, others, and casting Zelensky in that mold. So yes, of course, he's made it pretty clear that he cares about whether Ukraine survives, whether Ukrainians survive, and has therefore put forth a series of reasonable proposals that could well be a basis for negotiation. We should bear in mind that the nature of a political settlement, the general nature of it, has been pretty clear on all sides for quite some time. In fact, if the US had been willing to consider them, there might not have been an invasion at all. Before the invasion, the US basically had two choices. One was to pursue its official stance, which I just reviewed, which makes negotiations impossible and may have led to war. The other possibility was to pursue the options that were available.
Okay, so what the homie's saying is that that Zelensky does care about his country and he's open to negotiating, but America has, as a policy, gone out of its way to select options that don't make for peace. Dear listener, I want you to watch this video. Check out this video. It was shot a couple years ago. This person has since went off to be with God, inshallah. But check out this discussion. This happened prior to the invasion. Check this out.
You have a situation now, which seems not to be widely understood, that the new president of Ukraine, Zelensky, ran as a peace candidate.
He ran as a peace candidate, dear listener. Peace in the Donbass, peace with Russia. That was literally the platform that the big homie ran on. We continue.
This is a bit of a stretch, and maybe it doesn't mean a whole lot to your generation, but he ran a kind of George McGovern campaign. The difference was McGovern got wiped out, and Zelensky won by, I think, 71, 72%. He won an enormous mandate to make peace.
Zelensky wanted an enormous mandate to make peace. Why? Because I think that those folks in Ukraine are exhausted by the constant jihad, especially since 2014. Over and over and over and over and over again, people get tired of war. So they voted for the guy who said, I'm going to go shoot for peace. Well, what happened? We continue.
So that means he has to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. And there are various formats, right? There's the so-called Minsk format, which involves the German and the French. There's bilateral directly with Putin. But his willingness, and this is what's important and not well reported here, his willingness to deal directly with Putin, which his predecessor, Poroshenko, was not, or couldn't, or whatever reason, actually required considerable boldness on Zelensky because there are opponents of this in Ukraine and they are armed.
Zelensky was willing to discuss this bilaterally. That's hey, Mr. Putin, let's me and you sit down and we can sort this out for our two countries so that we can have some semblance of peace, seeing as how I got nominated as a peace candidate. Well, then what is going on?
Some people say they're fascist, but they're certainly ultra-nationalist. And they have said that they'll remove and kill Zelensky if he continues along this line of negotiation.
There are fascists. He says some say they are fascist. There are definitely ultra-nationalist elements that said they will remove and kill Zelensky if that happens. We continue. I just want to rewind that part. I think you guys need to see that part again because it's very fascinating.
In Ukraine, and they are armed. But his willingness, and this is what's important and not well reported here, his willingness to deal directly with Putin, which his predecessor, Poroshenko, was not, or couldn't, or whatever reason, actually required considerable boldness on Zelensky because there are opponents of this in Ukraine and they are armed. Some people say they're fascist, but they're certainly ultra-nationalist. And they have said that they'll remove and kill Zelensky if he continues along this line of negotiating with Putin. So now along comes Trump, right? So Trump makes a wrong-headed phone call to Zelensky about Biden and information.
You guys remember this? Where our country impeached a sitting president because he didn't give Mr. Zelensky weapons unconditionally. So because he only wanted to give weapons on conditions that you could find something on on Joe Biden, which doesn't really matter anyway, because as soon as the story would break, Twitter, Facebook, etc., they would shut it down. Mainstream media wouldn't report on it, and then there you go, like what happened with the laptop situation. But notice he's specifically talking about arming Zelensky to go continue the jihad with Russia. We continue.
It was a wrong thing to do. No two ways of looking at that. But the more important thing is, and that's why I'd like to see the full transcript of the, we've only been given a partial so far as I know. I want to know if Trump encouraged Zelensky to continue the negotiation with Putin. And here's why. Zelensky cannot go forward, as I've explained. I mean, his life is being threatened, literally, by quasi-fascist movements in Ukraine. He can't go forward.
Zelensky's life is being threatened by quasi-fascist movements in Ukraine. Dear listener, this was prior to the invasion. This guy died before the invasion even took place. So you got Zelensky, who campaigned on peace. You have Rig. I have the source. I will show you the source in 1 second. So you have Zelensky, who's willing to go for peace. You have the majority of Ukrainians who voted for him as a peace candidate. But then you have a quasi-fascist movement in Ukraine that is threatening his life were he to go forward with peace. Dear listener, I covered this. A few other people covered this. But Denis Kyriev was executed in the middle of the town square by the SBU, that's Ukrainians' Secret Service Security Police, because he was working on negotiating a peace settlement with the Russians. They executed him. So these folks are serious. If you go for peace, we will kill you. We continue.
With full peace negotiations with Russia, with Putin, unless America has his back. Maybe that won't be enough, but unless the White House encourages this diplomacy, Zelensky has no chance of negotiating an end to the war. So the stakes are enormously high.
Unless the United States gets his back in negotiating for peace, he doesn't stand a chance. So unless the U.S. shows up and says, listen, Azov, C-14, etc., we will wipe you off the map if you get in the way of this peace negotiation. We didn't do that because, as we've shown you, the U.S.'s priority is further aggression against Russia and further arms brokerage to the Ukrainians and further NATO enhancement, which brings Ukraine closer to NATO, which brings NATO closer to the border of Russia. We're supposed to ignore all of this and say that Putin is just a monster. All right. Check this out, dear listener. This is what the big homie Rig asked for. Let me shrink myself a little bit here. Like I said, we're going to be all over the place today, and that's completely fine. This is 18 April 2022. Siding with Ukraine's far right, U.S. sabotaged Zelensky's peace mandate. In 2019, Zelensky was elected as an overwhelming mandate to make peace with Russia. As Stephen Cohen warned that year, the U.S. chose to side with Ukraine's far right to fuel war. There it is, dear listener. Our country sided with the far right in order to fuel war. Zelensky ran as a peace candidate, Cohen explained. He won an enormous mandate to make peace, so that means he has to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. So that's who the big homie was talking just now. There's the clip. And then they talked about the impeachment trial and all this. And then here's a famous quote. If you don't want Russia to fight Ukraine over there, don't use Ukraine to fight Russia over there. That's when the big homie, Mr. Schiff, said, we're going to arm Ukraine so that they can fight the Russians instead of us. Okay. In using Ukraine to bleed Russia, the U.S. has showcased its contempt for everything in Ukraine that it claims to defend, namely its democracy and security. By treating Ukraine as a depot for U.S. weapons, the U.S. has joined Ukrainian fascists in sabotaging the 2015 Minsk Accords that could have put an end to the civil war triggered by a U.S.-backed coup the year prior. Minsk called for granting Ukraine's Russia-speaking population in the eastern Donbass limited autonomy and respect for their language. This prospect was a non-starter for the far-right nationalist and Nazi empowered by the 2014 U.S.-backed Maidan coup. Remember, we had the right sector, Nazis, Azov, we know they're Nazis, C-14, Svoboda, etc., etc., etc. Those people do not want peace with Russia for any reason. The uncomfortable truth is that a sizable portion of Kiev's current government and the protesters who brought it to power are indeed fascist. Two specialists with prominent Western think tanks wrote in Foreign Policy in March 2014. So in March 2014, it was okay to say Not only that the military at some level is populated by Nazi fascists, but also that a sizable element of their government was populated with Nazi fascists. We continue. The fascists have blocked peace in Donbass at every turn. When the Ukrainian government voted on a special law advancing the Minsk Accords in 2015, remember the Minsk Accords was we're going to have a ceasefire, we're going to stop killing those folks in Donetsk and Luhansk, I think it is. We're going to stop the atrocities of killing each other, etc., etc. The Svoboda Party and other far-right groups led violent clashes that killed 3 Ukrainian soldiers and left dozens wounded. So when Zelensky enacted a law so that the Minsk Accords, which they signed, could actually be activated, the Nazis went and killed 3 Ukrainian soldiers and stopped that from happening so that they could continue to kill more Russians in the Donbass region. In April 2019, Zelensky was elected with an overwhelming 73% of the vote on a promise to turn the tide. In his inaugural address the next month, Zelensky declared that he was not afraid to lose my own popularity, my ratings, and was prepared to give up my own position as long as peace arrives. That's what he said. I'm here to get us peace, and I don't care if I don't care what happens to me. I don't care what happens to my political aspirations. I will do anything possible for peace. Now watch this. And Rig, you're going to want to pay attention. Watch what happened, Rig. But Ukraine's powerful far-right and neo-Nazi militias made clear to Zelensky that reaching peace in the Donbass would have a much higher cost. What is the cost? What is the cost, dear listener? Well, here it is. No, he would lose his life, Right Sector co-founder Dmytro Anatolovich Yarosh, then the commander of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, responded 1 week after Zelensky's inaugural speech. He will hang somewhere on a tree in Kyriev if he betrays Ukraine and those who died in the revolution and the war. There it is, Rig. That's a direct quote. You can copy and paste that and Google it. That was Dmytro Yarosh. He said he will die. If you enact the Minsk Accords, which we agreed to already, if you actually enact that so we have actual peace with these people, you're going to die. We will kill you. We will hang you out in the middle of the town square. Along with threats to his life, Zelensky experienced direct obstacles to his peace mandate on multiple fronts. When Zelensky traveled to the Donbass in 2019 to promote elections for the rebel-held areas, he was confronted by angry members of the neo-Nazi Azov battalion rallying under the slogan of "No to Capitulation." In one exchange caught on video, Zelensky sparred with an Azov member over the president's calls for a military drawdown. I'm the president of this country. I'm 41 years old. I'm not a loser. I came and told you, remove the weapons. Mashallah, Mr. Zelensky. Good for you. This video is from 2019. It shows a confrontation between Zelensky and a member of the Azov battalion in the Donbass region. Zelensky demands that the neo-Nazis lay down their arms. The fighter refuses. Zelensky is not running the show. The neo-Nazis are. Look how this guy's looking at him. Look at him. Okay, so yeah, we couldn't hear any volume. We never can. But this is him saying, put down the weapons. Put down the weapons. I told you we're not having a discussion. I got elected. I got a mandate to put down the weapon. You saw the guy's affect. You saw his face. He's laughing at him because he knows he's not going to listen. And one of the leaders of Azov specifically said, we will hang this guy in the middle of the town square if we have any peace in the Minsk Accords. And those are the groups we decided to support over and against Zelensky's efforts to bring peace to that region, dear listener. So when you're supporting Ukraine and you're supporting NATO, giving all these weapons to these people, you are actively supporting the far right who is sabotaging peace for Ukraine at every single turn. I don't believe that Zelensky, people say all the time, they say, well, I mean, it's ridiculous to say that Zelensky is working with these people. Zelensky is a Jew. These are Nazis. Duh. He's not working with them voluntarily, but they've come out and literally threatened this man's life. They threatened to murder him if he had peace. And he has shown some testicular fortitude. He stood right up to them. The problem is that we have to have his back. All initially Putin asked for was neutralization, give the Donbassians some semblance of autonomy and stop bombing the shit out of them. And we're cool. Putin didn't even initially ask for the Crimean stuff. He didn't even ask for that initially. What he said was, make Donbass independent, respect the Minsk Accords, and stop edging towards NATO. What does our country do? What did the United States do? The United States said, no, we're going to continue arms brokerage, and we're going to keep the Ukrainians in an enhanced NATO partner. That was 2021, dear listener. Enhanced NATO partner. So I hope it's becoming clear to you. I hope it's becoming clear to you what's actually happening. I hope you can put the dots together now. Denis Kyriev, who was out there negotiating for peace, murdered by the SBU literally in the middle of the town square in broad daylight. We reported on that. This guy, Zelensky, ran on peace, which means the vast majority of Ukrainian citizens, your average everyday Ukrainian, wants peace. But you have a small faction of people who are armed and willing to kill, who threatened the president, said that they would kill him and hang him in the town square, and they are serious. The fact that Zelensky is a Jew makes it worse for Zelensky because he knows they would have no qualms about executing him because these people celebrate Stefan Bandera, who literally executed Jews by the tens of thousands in the middle of their town squares in Ukraine during World War II. That is who we are supporting and arming, dear listener. Unbelievable. All right, let's go back. Let's go back to Noam Chomsky.
Thank you very much for joining us here.
What I just described, demilitarization ability was to Ukraine survives, whether Ukrainians survive, and has therefore put forth a series of reasonable proposals that could well be a basis for negotiation. We should bear in mind that the nature of a political settlement, the general nature of...
Did Putin also offer to stop arming the separatists in Donbass? Well, the separatists in Donbass were the underdog in that situation. The Donbassians, the KIA is up to 15,000 now. This is a complete. Secondly, Sadie, this is not necessarily about Zelensky as much as it is about the United States. We are not arming and financially supporting the Russian separatists in Donbass. We are arming and financially supporting the Nazis in Ukraine and actively working to sabotage peace between the Ukrainians and the Russians. That's my problem. My problem is if we took the side of peace, this war would have ended yesterday. But we took the side of more war, more proliferation of weapons, more expansion of NATO, in spite of the fact that it's clear that those Ukrainian people just want peace. That's my problem. My country is actively instigating a war between family members and actively working to support evil people who do not want peace because they have a Nazi ideology. That's my problem.
It has been pretty clear on all sides for quite some time. In fact, if the U.S. had been willing to consider them, there might not have been an invasion at all.
If the U.S. had been open to considering them, there would be no invasion of all, maybe. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Before the invasion, the U.S. basically had two choices. One was to pursue its official stance, which I just reviewed, which makes negotiations impossible and may have led to war. The other possibility was to pursue the options that were available. To an extent, they're still somewhat available, attenuated by the war, but the basic terms are pretty clear. Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, announced at the beginning of the invasion that Russia had two main goals, neutralization of Ukraine and demilitarization. Demilitarization doesn't mean getting rid of all your arms. It means getting rid of heavy weapons connected to the interaction with NATO aimed at Russia.
Thank you, Noam Chomsky. Thank you. If you won't listen to little old me, and you shouldn't, listen to Noam Chomsky, who's an expert. Demilitarization of Ukraine does not mean Ukraine has no weapons to fight itself. What it means is stop getting these super technologically advanced weapons from the United States and then aiming them at us, considering you're on our border. This is madness. This is peak American privilege hypocrisy. To pretend that the Russian people are just supposed to be cool with a border country who's hostile to them that has billions of dollars worth of amazing technologically advanced weaponry that you cannot match. They're just supposed to be cool with that. Unbelievable. Diego Rodriguez says, Swiss intelligence officer claimed they never saw evidence of Russia providing weapons in Donbass. Most of their weapons came from dissenters from the Ukrainian army. I believe that. But even if the Russians supplied the Donbassians with weapons to defend themselves, that makes complete sense to me. We continue.
His terms meant basically were turn Ukraine into something like Mexico. So Mexico is a sovereign state, can choose its own way in the world, no limitations, but it can't join a Chinese-run military alliance, emplacing advanced weapons, Chinese weapons, on the U.S. border, carrying out joint military operations with the People's Liberation Army, getting training and advanced weapons from Chinese instructors and so on. In fact, that's so inconceivable that nobody even dares to talk about it. I mean, if any hint of anything like that happened, we know what the next step would be. No need to talk about it. So it's just inconceivable. And basically, Lavrov's proposals were saying they could plausibly be interpreted as saying, let's turn Ukraine into Mexico.
Noam, this is when Noam became a full-on Russian asset, because he's saying, like everybody who's against this war and the proliferation of war has been saying, we would never accept this as the United States. We would never accept a border country like Mexico joining a hostile military alliance called NATO or whatever with the Chinese, where the Chinese are doing advanced military exercise, getting them up to coalition standards, and then giving them weapons and technology, particularly if that weapons and technology were on par or superseded ours. We would end that shit in 14 seconds. But the hypocrisy of Americans who sit comfortably because they know that their neighbors in Canada and Mexico wouldn't dare even hint at such a coalition. Simultaneous to that, us telling Russians, oh, you guys are supposed to deal with that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So so the Russians are supposed to deal with that, but we would never deal with that. We would never accept that. And I don't care how many Ukrainian flags you have in your profile picture. The minute Mexico decides to join some coalition with China and started doing military exercises and started getting weapons and missiles and pointing them at us, your pro-Ukrainian self would be calling for the annihilation of Mexico. But Americans we love to pontificate from a comfortable position and tell them Russian people, deal with it. Yeah, exactly. American exceptionalism. And don't forget the biolabs. Correct. We continue. Shout out to Hunter Biden.
Well, that was an option that could have been pursued. Instead, the U.S. preferred to do what I just described as inconceivable for Mexico. Now, that's not the whole story. There are other issues. One issue is Crimea. Fact of the matter is, Crimea is off the table. We may not like it. Crimeans apparently do like it, but the U.S. says we're never going to concede it. Well,
remember, the Crimeans in 2014 immediately put out a referendum to be recognized as a part of the Russian Federation right after the Euromaidan stuff took off, because to quote them, to quote the leader of Crimea at the time, we do not want to be ruled by Nazis. That's what they said. So the Crimeans voted to a clip of 96% because they didn't want to be ruled by Nazis. So when he says Crimea isn't up for grabs, he's right. He's absolutely right. Because the Crimeans don't want to be part of Ukraine, and the Russians are obviously more than welcome to take them, obviously, because that's the will of the people. Isn't that what we want, the will of the people? Here's the thing. It's the will of the people, and it also makes for peace, and peace is a good thing.
It's a basis for permanent conflict. Zelensky has sensibly said, let's put that off for further discussion. That makes sense. Another issue is the Donbas region. That's been a region of extreme violence for 8 years, both sides. Ukrainian shelling, Russian shelling, landmines all over the place, lots of violence. There are OSCE observers, European observers on the ground who give regular reports. You can read them, they're public. They don't try to assess the source of the violence. That's not their mission, but they talk about its radical increase. According to them, I think, if my memory is correct, about 15,000 people or something in that neighborhood may have been killed in the conflict over the last 8 years since the Maidan uprising. Well, something has to be done about Donbas. The proper reaction, which maybe the Russians would accept, would be a referendum, an internationally supervised referendum to see what the people of the region want. One possibility, which was
another referendum to see what the people want. Well, we know, if you know anything about the Donbass region, you know exactly what those people want. They want to be looked upon as an autonomous region that has the power of self-will and determination, and for the Ukrainians to respect the Minsk Accords and stop violently attacking them, which Mr. Zelensky, as recently as 2019, wanted to honor. Remember, Mr. Zelensky wanted to honor the Minsk Accords, but was not able to because the neo-Nazis over there in the Donbass region from the Ukrainian side told him explicitly, "We will kill you, we will murder you, and we will hang you in the middle of the town square if you have peace with these people." They told him that. They put that out there in their media. So if we had a referendum where people could voice their opinion, we all know what the Donbassians would say. The issue is, are the Azov C-14 Svoboda Nazis going to allow that to happen? The answer is no, unless a bigger bully comes along and says, okay, then we'll take care of you. The problem is the biggest bully on the planet is arming and supporting these people. That's our country. Just newsflash. We're the bad guy in this situation. We are the bad guy in this situation. When I say the, I'm saying the ultimate bad guy. Is Putin a bad guy? Absolutely. Are the Azov Nazis and the rest of those folks bad guys? Absolutely. But we're the ultimate bad guys because we have the power to bring peace to that region, and we're refusing to do it because of arms sales and the other issues. We continue.
Available before the invasion was implementation of the Minsk II agreements, which...
Here's Kai. So stop supporting and the Russians will go home. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it would be wise for America to stop supporting Nazis. And if we stop supporting Nazis and allow Zelensky to do what the Ukrainian people voted him in office to do, I do believe that we'd be in a much better situation. That's what I believe. We continue.
Provided for some form of autonomy in the region within a broader Ukrainian federation. Something like maybe Switzerland or Belgium or other places where there are federal structures, conflict, but confined within federal structures. That would have been a possibility. Whether it could have worked, there's only one way to find out: to try. U.S. refused to try, instead insisted on a super militant position.
Correct. This has been one of my major problems with folks on this side here, on the side of the more proliferation of war. Oh, Putin would have done it anyway. How do you know? What's the empirical data that you can show me that says that? We don't know that. And we haven't tried. We haven't turned over every stone to get to peace. We've gone the opposite way, and then we have the audacity to say, oh, he would have done it anyway. Really? Then why was he going to the UN for 10 years straight telling us to stop expanding NATO if they were going to do it anyway? Why didn't he do it 10 years ago then? Unbelievable, guys. Unbelievable. Brent says, how do I call in? Brent, you simply take this link here, and there you go. You can call in if you have, but you can only call in if you have a disagreement. Only disagreeables can call me. We continue.
Official position, which, as far as I know, the press has yet to report. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I have never seen one reference anywhere in the mainstream press, so occasionally way at the margins, any reference to the official U.S. position of September 1st, 2021, the reiteration and expansion of it in November in the Charter. Actually, I saw one reference to it in the American Conservative Journal, which did refer to it. But, and of course, on the left, people have talked about it. But the U.S. insisted on that position, which the alternative would have been to pursue the option of saying, okay, your main goals are neutralization and demilitarization, meaning.
But the U.S. refused. Who's on the line?
Oh, this is Brent. Hello?
Brent, you are live. What's up, brother?
So I've been hearing you talk about Ukraine and Russia, and you do make sense, but it just kind of seems like you're more supporting of Russia than Ukraine. My issue is Russia shouldn't have invaded at all, because Ukraine is a sovereign country and they should have the right to decide what they do within its borders. Even if we disagree or any other country disagrees, they just have the right to decide what they do within their borders. Like if we allowed other countries to invade other countries, if we justify that justified countries invading other countries, then the world will be a huge mess. And I feel like by mentioning all the reasons why Ukraine is corrupt, they're all legitimate, and all those reasons do show that Ukraine is not innocent, nor is the United States. But I feel like Russia is ultimately the one to blame for starting an illegal invasion, if that makes sense.
Brent, are you an American?
Yes.
Brent, can I ask you to be brutally honest with me?
Sure.
If ISIS became a world superpower, okay, with nuclear capabilities, and had where do you live in America, if you don't mind?
California.
Excellent. Perfect. So I figured you were from Cali, but this is even better. Now, I want you to try to be as honest with me as possible. If a Mexican, let's say 2 years ago, there was a virulent anti-American who staged a coup and took over Mexico, right? And then simultaneous to that, as that's happening, ISIS becomes a world superpower and creates a hostile military alliance called NATO, the Muslim alliance to overthrow America, whatever, right? And the Mexicans start doing exercises with the ISIS folks, start buying weapons, and start pointing those weapons that can reach California in 7 minutes. And both of these states are hostile to the United States. What would you want America to do?
You mean Mexico and this ISIS organization, you mean?
Yep. So 2 years ago, Mexico was taken over by a explicitly anti-American Death to America cult. And then they're trying ever so slightly to join NATO, which is the Muslim alliance to destroy America. What would you want America to do with Mexico? Honestly.
Well, honestly, I'll speak honestly. I don't believe in war, but I mean, negotiate, diplomacy, and then given what demands do they want, and give in. But basically, I'm kind of nuanced in this.
Hold on, brother. Hold on. Remember, you can't negotiate with these people because they're idealists and they hate America. They want to kill you. So they're impossible to negotiate with. Their policy is we want as much weapons as possible, and we want to join this alliance against America. What would you want America to do about that?
To build defenses to prevent them from those weapons harming the United States. I mean, I don't believe in invading the country.
My brother. We're talking about the real world, right? There is no defense for a hypersonic missile. It can get to your house in 7 minutes. There's no defense for that. So what do you want America to do? Be real.
If you were like, even if you were like that, really, if what you're saying is true, they have weapons that could, in 7 minutes. I mean, that is a tough question, because even if you try to invade, they would still use those weapons anyway. I mean, it's kind of like you're kind of stuck.
Would you want them to invade before they attacked, or would you want America to go to Mexico and say, listen, if you do this, if you do one more thing to get yourself closer to this NATO thing, we're going to go in there and fuck you up before you have the chance to do that? Is that crazy for America to do? Let me ask you another question, Brent.
Sure.
Whether or not you like that posture from America, would you be relieved as an American, especially a Californian, considering that you're bordering Mexico? Let's just be as honest as we possibly can, my brother. Would you be relieved if our country went and said, listen, Mexico, if you go 1 inch closer to NATO, if you get one more missile from NATO, we're going to go in there and shut that shit down. We're not going to let you bomb the shit out of Brent and his family. Would you be relieved if America did that?
Ooh, that is a tough question. And
is it? You wouldn't be relieved?
Because if the U.S. if they really had those weapons that you're describing, and the U.S. were to try to invade anywhere, wouldn't they use those weapons?
Say again?
If Mexico and its alliance had those weapons, and the U.S., like in this hypothetical situation, tried to invade, wouldn't they use those weapons anyway?
Well, my point is that you would want America to preempt that situation to protect you, wouldn't you?
I mean, we use that situation, that excuse before with weapons of mass destruction.
We didn't, my brother, because number one, there were no weapons of mass destruction, and number two, Iraq doesn't border us.
Well, that was the excuse. That was the excuse.
And it was a lie, right?
Yes, it was a lie.
Okay. Are we arming the Ukrainians with weapons of mass destruction at the border of Russia, yes or no?
I don't know what your definition of weapons of mass destruction, but they are, based on what I've been reading, they are arming the Ukrainians.
With weapons
they are arming the Ukrainians.
That can get to Moscow in 7 minutes. Right?
Right.
Okay, so you as an American would be relieved if we went in there and stopped that by any means necessary, wouldn't you? Especially since you're a Californian?
I didn't do enough research on this, but did they arm him before or after the invasion?
Long before, my brother. My brother, in 2014, the neo-Nazis took over that country. Okay? And we've been sending billions of dollars, my brother, even as recently as the Trump administration. Brent, why did Trump get impeached? You know what that phone call was with Zelensky? That phone call was us giving them even more weapons. That was as recently as 2019. Was us giving them more weapons. I just read, I don't know if you saw this or not, but the United States, our official policy that was published on September 1st, 2021, was that we were going to send more weapons and that we rejected any peace or compromise with the Russians. On top of that, Zelensky has said, let's go for peace. And the neo-Nazis in that country said, if you go for peace, we will murder you. So that means that there's a rogue element in that country that wants war, is willing to kill its own president, willing to kill its own people, and those are the people that are being armed to the tune of billions of dollars of U.S. weaponry. And you're saying that the Russians are crazy for saying, yo, I don't want that at our border.
They're not, but I don't feel that they should have invaded.
Isn't it hypocritical for you to say, yeah, I would be relieved if America stopped it, but you're asking a Russian citizen to deal with that?
Oh, I'm not saying they should deal with it. I mean, what I'm saying is that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that they shouldn't invade. Like, the United States shouldn't invade in the hypothetical situation. They shouldn't invade. They should find ways, defenses against that weaponry. I mean,
how long has Vladimir Putin tried to negotiate with these folks? Do you know? A decade.
I would say at least a decade. Yeah, at least a decade.
And in 2009, okay, so let's think this through. You said you should try to negotiate, et cetera, et cetera. I'm with you, bro. I'm with you 100%. Okay. However, here's the problem. This man has been trying to tell us this for a decade. In 2019, the Ukrainians drafted an amendment in their constitution to push them closer to NATO, which means more U.S. weapons. And then in 2021, on the U.S. side, we said we reject offers for peace and we want more weapons proliferation in Ukraine. So he's been doing it for 10 years, and Ukraine is showing signs of more militarization, and so is the United States. So what is Russia supposed to do?
In my opinion, they should set up defenses in case they use those weapons. That's what I think. But I mean,
I agree, but
that might not be realistic.
Brett, it's not, because these missiles can reach Moscow in 7 minutes. There's no defense for that. We just have to rely on the goodwill of the Ukrainians that they're not going to use that against them. But the Ukrainians are populated with insane fascists who are willing to kill their own president. They've said that on record. So Russia's supposed to say, yeah, I mean, this is not going to go bad ever. We're signaling in our official documents hostility. They're signaling in their constitution more hostility. What are the Russians supposed to do in that situation?
I still believe they should set up more, but I know that's probably not.
Right. You're asking the Russians to do something that you would never want your country to do, bro. Let's just be real. If you felt that your life was threatened by a bunch of crazy Islamo-fascists, and
I would expect the United States to be ready to defend when they strike. That's what I think.
Oh, okay.
I mean, because I feel like.
Okay, go ahead. Say what you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I personally feel that if they have those weapons at the border, it's kind of like is it a proxy war is the right term? And when you set up, you have a hostile situation where there's guns pointed at you, and then you set up more defenses in case, like, I feel like you should set up defenses, but I feel like you shouldn't invade just because they have a lot of weapons. You should be aware of the situation and try to set up defense. I feel like in the hypothetical situation, the United States should have defenses in case they were to fire. And I feel like the United States should have the firepower to block any missile.
Yeah, but they don't.
That Mexico would have.
We don't. Nobody does. My brother, the reason that we haven't all died in a nuclear mushroom cloud is the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. And what that means is the U.S. has nukes, the Russians have nukes. We can't do anything to defend ourselves against nukes, but what will happen is if you nuke us, we'll nuke you, and that's how it cancels each other out, okay? The problem is that they have weapons that that Russia cannot defend, they can only retaliate with. So what you're saying is, this is essentially what you'd be saying, Brent. You'd be saying, okay, yeah, you can liquidate me and my family, but then I expect America to respond in kind. Would that be acceptable to you, or would you rather your family not be threatened with liquidation as an American? Tell me what you would want.
I was under the impression that the United States. Yeah.
I'm not asking you what you think is right. I'm not asking you what you think is morally right. What I'm asking you is, in the deepest recesses of your heart, what would you want to happen? Would you want to be you and everybody you love liquidated, but then as the missiles coming to drop on your house, you could say, well, America's going to respond in kind, so I'm okay? Or would you want our country to take actions to make sure that missile never drops on your house? Tell me what you would want.
If it's established that they're going to use the missiles, then I would want them to strike. Yeah, I mean,
I understand.
Obviously, that's not ideal. It's not ideal, and I feel like it should never get to that point. But if it's clearly established that they will use those missiles, if there's evidence showing that they will use those missiles, not just holding on them for safekeeping, then I would expect them to strike. But there has to be proof that they will use them.
Brent, I'm with you 110%. And the proof is the Donbass region, where they've been shelling the hell out of Russians for the last 8 years in violation of the Minsk Accords. They've already done it. And then when Zelensky went and said, stop doing this to these people, the Nazis said, get the fuck out of here or we'll kill you. So he's clearly not in control of that country. So if what I'm saying is true, that they've already been doing it for 8 years, then what else do you want the Russians to do?
So the same weapons that they've been using in that I'm not aware of what kind of weapons they're using. Are those the same weapons that the U.S. would not have any defenses against?
My brother, of course, because a lot of weapons defense is proximity, right? If I'm like 60,000 miles away from you, maybe I can get you with a Patriot missile. But my brother, we don't have like a magic net that can intercept missiles once they launch, right? Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Okay, the Cuban Missile Crisis was, it was before our time, but basically the Russians were setting up ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and aiming them at the United States in Cuba. Okay? And you know how the U.S. responded to that? We almost started World War fucking III. And that's not even a border town. They're 90 miles away from us. These people are literally on top of each other. Literally, Ukraine means border. That's why people call it the Ukraine, because it means border. So, my issue is, on a moral level, I'm with you. Putin is a dick for going in there and invading the country. But on a human level, I completely understand it. And my thing is, it's unfair and hypocritical for Americans who would never be in the situation that the Russians are in to ask the Russians to deal with that kind of tension for an inordinate amount of time. Especially when, Brent, we are signaling that we are not on the side of peace for these people.
Oh, no, I knew that. When I was watching the coverage on CNN, I knew something was wrong. Like, why you should be pushing for peace and de-escalation. You shouldn't be pushing encouraging Zelensky in that war. They should be working towards being neutral and all this. I mean, maybe that's a little idealistic, but they should be pushing for more peace, not encouraging more war. It didn't make sense to me. So
that's why I'm saying we're the bad guy.
Yeah,
I understand. Look, your average Ukrainian doesn't want war and does not want to kill a bunch of Russians. The average Ukrainian voted for Zelensky to come in under peace. Zelensky's entire campaign strategy was, I'm going to bring peace to the region. We're going to stop all these wars. So he got voted in. Okay, some guy with no political clout or whatever, that's how desperately these people want war. Then you had a small faction of neo-Nazis saying, fuck that. If you do anything that actually goes toward peace, we will kill you and hang you in the middle of the town square. And our response to that is, we're going to arm the neo-Nazis and we're going to continue this far-right anti-peace push. Simultaneous to that, you've got Russians who are terrified and have been begging us for 10 years to stop this shit. So my position on this is, Putin is a dick for invading that country. Because anytime you have war, women are going to be raped, kids are going to be orphans, civilians are going to die. So he's a dick for doing that. Simultaneous to that, I also say that the Nazis there are obvious dicks for doing that, for stymieing any sort of peace. And then we are the biggest dicks of all, Brent, because we are actively taking a side that guarantees more bloodshed. That's my position.
Yes.
What's your position?
Yes, because they want to make money off the weapons. The U.S. is all they want to capitalize on, take advantage of the situation. Yeah.
Okay, I think we lost the homie.
What? No,
Brent,
you hear me?
I can't hear you. Say something.
Hello?
Yep. Go ahead. You there?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes?
I can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I'm gonna let you have the final word. People can hear you.
Okay, so what you explained about like the Ukraine, Russia living in fear of NATO and the weapon and like the increased weaponry provided by the United States, it makes sense.
Okay.
And I totally get. I still feel that there shouldn't be. I mean, maybe that's in theory. There shouldn't be war. Like Russia should not have invaded. In theory, but we live in a world where we have to think practically, and the threat of Ukraine possibly attacking Russia.
You and I are on the same side. I don't know if you heard this.
Yes, because most people in our country would say either Russia is all bad and Ukraine is all innocent, or you have some grifters on YouTube, I won't say their names, who believe that Russia is all right and Ukraine, all the reasons you listed about Ukraine, that just 100% justifies Russia going to war.
Yeah.
And Ukraine got what they deserved.
I disagree with that.
There's a nuance. Yeah, there's some. I can't believe it, but there's some grifters on YouTube saying that. But there's a nuance. Like Russia was wrong to invade, but at the same time, Ukraine and the United States should not have escalated the situation to the point where
correct
Russia resorted to an irresponsible war. There's something in between.
Yes.
And honestly, I'm not in a position to be involved in politics, so I don't know what the answer is. But all I know is that there's no real innocent party in this situation,
other than the Russian civilians who just want peace and the Ukrainian civilians who voted in Zelensky and commanded him to bring them peace. Right.
Right. So there is, I mean, those are the people that are innocent, but it's kind of like Ukraine. There needs to be a way where they need to de-escalate.
Correct.
Because if they don't, then Russia's going to resort to irresponsible invasions like what they're doing now, and Brent, it's just not right.
Brent, I gotta stop you there. I've never heard anybody use that term before. But that is literally the term. I believe Mr. Putin acted completely irresponsibly. I agree. That is such a perfect way to... Now, granted, the man is in a very difficult position, but I do believe the invasion was irresponsible. That's such a brilliant way of putting it because, you know, we got nuclear powers saber rattling each other. Brilliant statement. You're 100% right. I agree with you completely.
Right, and it's really like and this nuance will never be discussed in mainstream media. Like you hear the cheerleading on CNN for Ukraine, like you see the Ukrainian flags, but they mention nothing. They mention nothing about Iraq or Libya or Yemen.
Correct.
And it's kind of like it's such bullshit. But at the same time, like I don't want to be like some of those YouTube grifters where they say that Russia was 100% justified and Ukraine deserved what they got. It's just. Bullshit. There's a nuance, and it's the nuance is very. You're one of the few that understand the nuance of the situation, and the hypothetical you described. Like, honestly, I would if there was imminent war, I would move out of the country.
Right.
That's what I would do. Like, I would move out of the country. Like if I heard, because the Mexican border is 2 hours away from me, and if I heard if Mexico was on the, I don't care what the United States, I would move somewhere else.
Yeah, but little bro,
there has to be some element of personal responsibility.
Little bro, you have the financial means of doing that. What if I'm dirt poor and I can't go anywhere? Right.
Well, right. Right, but like there has to be some element of personal responsibility as well. But at the same time, like if you can't move, then you just gotta. The worst case scenario is if they're gonna strike and it's gonna be imminent, then the U.S. has to respond somehow. But there has to be proof that those missiles will. It's almost a certainty that those missiles are gonna be fired. That's just my opinion. Like,
yeah. I hear you, Brent, man. Look, you and I this call is the exact reason we have the channel. We're all going to try to figure this shit out together. To your point, none of us are experts. I certainly am not. You're not, but we're both looking at the situation and saying, hey, do you see this? Do you see this? And we're coming to a conclusion together. That's the entire point. Thank you so much for calling in. I'll let you have the last word.
I really like your channel. I've been listening to you since there was a issue with Jimmy Dore.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
The Jimmy Dore drama. Like I used to listen to the Young Turks and like a few of the other like podcasters before then, and then after that Jimmy Dore drama, what happened to him was total bullshit. Like all those other YouTube podcasters that went against him, they're all about money. Like especially Kyle Clinton, he was worried about his financial stability, so he sided with the Young Turks, even though he knew, I bet he knows deep down that Jimmy Dore was right, but he chose the money rather than his principles. It's just disgusting.
100%. Yeah,
it's just disgusting. And then, yeah.
No, yeah, bro. I remember that whole situation, dude. It was kind of crazy. I ended up doing an interview with Jimmy Dore during that whole situation. I never released it because I had audio issues and there was a horrible echo and like it was just unlistenable. So I've never released it, but I don't know. Maybe send me an email. I'll send it to you and you can tell me if it's worth posting, huh?
Well, Jimmy Dore is actually really close to me. He's in LA and I go to his in-person show like almost every week. And I'm surprised. I thought he'd be a little bit more hot-headed because of his personality, but he's actually he and I align more than I thought I would. Like he understands the nuance of the situation. So he's great.
Yeah. Jimmy, he was only supposed to talk to us for 15 minutes. He stayed for like an hour and a half. And yeah, he's a real gentle, reasonable guy. It's just when he gets online, he's kind of carrying the frustrations of millions of us to a degree, right? So when he's speaking on it, he's speaking for all of us and he gets a little bit animated, but he's a real gentle, rational guy.
Yeah,
when you get him one-on-one.
He's great. Like whenever I see these fake politicians like AOC and Maxine Waters, like Maxine Waters told homeless people to go home, and it's kind of like,
I know, unbelievable.
Like, and AOC, she's just another fake phony who's looking for career advancement and status. She's also very disgusting, and I don't know how you could support her, but that's just we can disagree there. But
I know. I see. It's the same convo I had with Jimmy.
Yeah, like I know you. She worked from being a bartender to being a politician. But if you don't do the job, it doesn't matter where you come from. You're going to be called out, and Jimmy did a great job calling her out. So
yeah, you guys are converting me a little bit to the anti-AOC crowd. But
yeah, she's one of those vain people who wants to be invited to the cool parties, like the Met Gala. She wants to wear the nice fancy dresses, yet she doesn't follow through on her campaign promises. She's full of shit.
100%.
But obviously, I can't say like if I can't speak like that in public because people will say, "Oh, she's a hardworking, she's a minority, she works hard." No, she's a phony looking for career advancement and the status, and she wants to wear the nice dresses at the nice parties.
All right. I'll need a couple more Chris Smalls type failures to be 100% with you guys, but I see where you're coming from. Thank you so much for calling in, my brother.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Have a good one. Yep.
Bye.
That was Brent, dear listener. He was amazing. And again, guys, this is what we're about. It's discussion. It's talking. It's not one guy pontificating to everybody what everybody's supposed to believe, Brent came in there. He came in there strong. He believes what he believes, but he's also open-minded, willing to augment his position, willing to see things from a human perspective. And I don't think there's a more appropriate word that was used. Irresponsible. Russians are irresponsible for invading. Americans are irresponsible for playing this nuclear game of chicken with a nuclear power. All right. All right, dear listener. I'm going to land the plane on this one. I have another I'm going to sneak peek to you guys a developing story that's happening. There is a Chilean national that goes by the name of Gonzalo Lira, Lira, or Lyra. And he lives in Ukraine, and he has been an active critic of Ukraine. Recently, he has gone missing. He has not put out a tweet in the last 3 days. And there are elements in Ukraine that are talking about how they kidnapped him and beheaded him. You know what? Let me just do it real quick for you guys, and then I'll break it up into a separate episode so you don't have to keep looking for it. So here it is. Here's what I'll do. I'm gonna go back to the regular Middle America intro. I'll intro it, and then I'll play the story. So then you guys, and then later on I'll cut it up so you guys don't have to go mining through this 2-hour video to see it. Okay, so going back to the intro, and then after the intro, I will show you guys the Gonzalo Lyra stuff, and then I'm gonna go to the gym. Okay. Let me get this here. All right. Gonzalo Lyra missing. Is he in trouble? Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
And you ain't black.
The first time ever any...
What are you people? We're Americans. Oh, wait. Robert Barnes reported that he is okay. So I may not have to do this story because that's the best of all possible worlds. Let me find this Robert Barnes. Who's Robert Barnes? Is he Supreme Court for the Washington? Jason, do me a favor. Where do you see that Lyra's okay from Robert Barnes? This is a developing story, guys, so be patient, but hopefully Lyra is okay. But where did you see that? A reminder that the Daily Beast contacted Ukraine's Nazi-infested government to request a comment on the status of viral YouTuber Real Gonzalo at the time. He accused of trying to get him killed. Nobody's heard of him since April. Where? And when was that podcast? Show me the link, Jason. Because as recently as 3 hours ago, CNN Chile confirmed that Gonzalo Lyra was missing. So if you have an update, that would be great. Let me check on CNN Chile. Because I haven't heard that about Gonzalo yet. So before I go on this story, guys, I just want to make sure that it's completely accurate, and then we'll discuss it. But Gonzalo Lyra. 2 hours ago. Okay. I'm just gonna do the story, guys, because right now I'm not hearing anybody else say that he has been apprehended in a safe way. As a matter of fact, Aaron Mate, who's been following this story closely, hasn't said so either. Let's see. Okay. I'm just going to report it. Listen, Jason, if you have the link, please direct me to the link or direct me to the title of the article or the title of the YouTube video, and we'll play it here. But as far as I know, Gonzalo still lost. Okay, guys, here is the story about Gonzalo Lira. Okay, so Gonzalo is, as I said, he is currently as far as we know, he's born in Chile, but he's been very, very critical of Ukraine and the ultra nationalists in Ukraine. He's been tweeting, doing interviews, etc., etc. And recently, folks have expressed concern because he has not been posting. As a matter of fact, Gonzalo said the following. Check this out, guys, because this stuff right here is pretty terrifying. So here we go. It's extremely troubling that real Gonzalo Lira, a U.S. citizen in Ukraine, has disappeared from social media. He was scheduled to interview me last Friday about Zelensky's SBU kidnapping and assassinating dissidents, and now I fear that he has become its latest victim. Now, you see this little thing here that he has in the in the postscript there? Gonzalo said, Google these names. If you want to learn the truth about the Zelensky regime, Google these names. And then he lists a bunch of people, including Dennis Kyriev, who were basically kidnapped, tortured, and killed by the Ukrainian elements of the Ukrainian government. And again, when I say elements of the Ukrainian government, you have got to take into account the fact that many folks in the Ukrainian government and many active folks in Ukraine on the military side are part of the neo-Nazis. So I don't want to I'm trying to make a distinction between the Ukrainian government. I'm trying to make a distinction between the Ukrainian government and neo-Nazis, okay? But so he sends out this list of people who've been kidnapped or executed by the Ukrainians. And then he says, if I don't post in 12 hours, I'm on this list. Okay, meaning I'm one of those people who's been kidnapped and killed. Okay, that's what he said. He said at the end of this, he says, if I don't post in 12 hours, it's because I'm one of those people on the list. Okay, Gonzalo hasn't tweeted in about 48 hours, much closer to 3 days actually. He hasn't tweeted in 3 days. Nobody can get in contact with him, supposedly. So that's what's been going on with Gonzalo. Now hold on, we've got a breaking thingamajiggy here. If I can get a YouTube video, there's the YouTube video from Amy Lee Forever, and it says Gonzalo Lira reported to be captured is the name of the video. Jason is saying it's 23 minutes into the video, but there's only 12 minutes. Jason, this video is only 12 minutes long. So Jason, get me the video. Okay. So there you go. Gonzalo Lira, there he is. He says, if I don't respond in 12 hours, it's because I'm on this list. I've been captured by these bad actors. But even more concerning, watch what else has happened. Okay? Look at this. There's this guy named Botsman. He's a Ukrainian Azov Nazi fella. Okay, Jason, get me the link and I will play it. Right now, all I have is that he's missing. If you're saying that he's alive, I would like to know. Aaron Mate doesn't know. Nobody knows that he's alive. But if you've got breaking news, please provide us a link and then we'll be able to look at it. Okay? All right. Tweets from the Ukrainian Nazi Sergei Botsman, who has now made his account private, says Gonzalo Lira has been kidnapped, tortured, and might be beheaded Impossible to verify, but this is plausible. SBU is known to torture and murder its victims. Remember, the SBU are the folks who killed Denis Kyriev, who was trying to negotiate for peace with Russia. From the Twitter account of the infamous Ukrainian neo-Nazi Botsman, remember his name, he was in the first group of troops to enter Bucha. Gonzalo Lira is most likely to have been taken by them. He's watching here just now, by the way. Okay, so there you go. That's you've got some Ukrainian Nazis saying that he's been captured. Here he is right here. Inshallah, let's hope this is true. Somebody's saying, we don't know for sure if he's dead. They might still be torturing him. He says, inshallah, let's hope this is true. And then you have this right here. The irony of Gonzalo Lira, a Chilean, being caught by a guy with the call sign Chile is hilarious. Anyway, let's hope the beheading pops up on Telegram soon. Okay? So there's this guy by the name of Chile in Azov Battalion, and this guy is saying that it may very well be that he was beheaded by that guy. Okay, these folks are absolutely unbelievable. Check this out. That guy right there that's making the bicep, the guy right there that's doing the bicep pose, that's Chile. Okay? If anyone knows where Gonzalo Lira is, please make a single bicep pose. That right there is Chile. And he, according to this guy, is the one that killed Gonzalo Lira. So he's openly bragging about allegedly assassinating, killing this dissident who was tweeting. They're openly bragging about murdering this dude. And then what's even worse is this. Sergei Botsman of the Azov Battalion has beheaded people before. He beheaded Shamil Odamanov for being Dagestani in an infamous murder video from 2007. Once again, these are the people that want war at any and every cost. Okay? So these are the people that want war at any and every cost. They've already beheaded people on camera and cycled it. Here's Scott Ritter speaking on the issue. Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector who spoke out against U.S. involvement in Iraq. Kharkov is definitely a city that's firmly in the grip of the Nazis. That's where Lyra was. And anybody who lives in that city, such as Mr. Lyra, who is not of that political persuasion, is at risk. So right now, guys, all we know is that Gonzalo Lyra is missing. He is feared to be beheaded. He is feared to have been being tortured. This is a guy who was tweeting and giving interviews critical of Ukraine. But he's turned up missing and feared to be dead. And as Tasco says, I have very, very little hope that this guy is going to end up being found alive. I've got, I'm generally an optimistic person, but I have very little hope that he is going to make it out of this alive. They're calling him a Russian spy, which is all you have to do, apparently. Jason is saying that he's got contrary information. I want to see this. Where is the link? Where's the link, Jason? You said you posted it. Where did you post it? Because I still don't see it. Unbelievable, guys. Watch the Duran video. Yeah, you haven't posted anything, man. Where's the link? Look, if it's on YouTube, Jason, just give me the title of the video, and then I'll put it in, and then we'll be able to look at it. Because right now, that's all we have, is that he's missing. Nobody can find him. this is all because of a Dear the Daily Beast article wrote about him. I don't know what you're saying, Alden. My girlfriend's cousin works in Bosnia and investigates, hunts war criminals from Yugoslav war. These people will be hunted till the day they die for war crimes. Yeah, get us the video ID or the video title so that we can use that as a counterbalance. But I'm not seeing anywhere where he's been found. Gonzalo said, if something happens to me, it'll be because of that article. Yeah. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And by the way, guys, if you were curious, the Azov Nazi guy who goes around beheading people and celebrating the beheadings of people has not been banned or deplatformed by Twitter. If you were curious as to how Twitter was going to respond to militant Nazis calling for the beheading of people because they're using their free speech capabilities to criticize Ukraine, the guy who's bragging about killing that guy and joking about beheading that guy and encouraging other people to do the same, he is he's fine. He's fine on YouTube. He's completely fine to use the platform. But a United States president, a satirical site, Tucker Carlson, etc., those people need to be deplatformed because they're dangerous. But the guy who's talking about chopping people's heads off for daring to speak critically of Ukraine, he's okay. He's okay. Unbelievable. We will update you guys as the story continues. Jason is not providing us the title of the supposed interview where Gonzalo was found and interviewed to be safe yesterday. So at this point, I'm going to say, Jason, you're wrong. That's not true. He's still missing and nobody can find him. I will do an update video, guys. I'll do an update video once we get confirmation as to his whereabouts. Unfortunately, I fear we're going to see him in some horrible Telegram video issued by the Ukrainians, and I would just advise you not to watch it. There's no reason to watch somebody get killed. We know that we're dealing with some very bad people. So I would advise you not to watch it. I'm not going to watch it if it gets posted. So it is what it is. Unbelievable, guys. Okay, so I finally got a video, and you said in the 23-minute mark. Let's see, 23 minutes. Okay, here's the 23-minute mark, guys. Can you guys hear this, by the way? Let me know if you guys can hear this. Good Lord. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to convert this thing into a Okay. So on the show, he says that I'm just going to read what he says, guys. On the show, he says, yeah, he had a conversation with George Galloway. They talked to him a couple hours ago. He should be fine. That's not the majority report at all. This is a guy saying that he heard that Gonzalo was fine, but nobody else can find him, and he has not posted in close to 3 days. So thank you for that, but there's no definitive proof. This is just hearsay. This is just a guy saying, yeah, I talked to somebody who said he talked to him a couple hours ago, but nobody else is saying that. And the other concerning thing is that they can't find him. He's not tweeting, and he's a pretty ubiquitous tweeter who tweets a lot. This guy is missing, and the Chilean, listen, just recently, guys, the Chilean government, I'm gonna post this for you guys because you can see it, because Aaron Mate has been keeping us abreast at this. Here you go. The CNN Chile, this is 3 hours ago, guys. CNN Chile confirms that they're actually heading up an investigation in Ukraine to figure out what the hell is going on with Gonzalo. So, thank you, Jason, for your contribution, but no, he has not been found at all, unless we want to believe that this random guy on YouTube knows something that the Chilean government doesn't know. I will here's the actual clip from YouTube because it's downloaded. Check it out, guys. Let me get to the 24
and
minute
show
mark.
them photos of. He came out of the Washington Post this past week, and so he's fine. So
of writing it off because it rubs what you
okay. So here it is, right here,
the wrong way. I mean, I guess Robert, on that, before we get there, the managerial class in trial behind you. Have we discussed this book before?
No, it's this week's book for the book sort of book club. That's we either do a book or movie review each Friday at vivabarneslaw.locals.com at a live stream. And this week's book is The Managerial Class on Trial. And I'll be reading the book with the board because I have not read it. I just recently got it.
And Robert, ask about Gonzalo Lira. He's now missing. Have
My
you heard this?
My understanding is he's talked to what it is in that particular town, there's escalating conflict and there's some electricity and internet outages in part of the town. And he has been in contact with George Galloway, who's kind of from the left anti-war critic. And so he's fine. So that's the last I heard, which was just a couple hours ago.
Okay.
That's not the case. Here we go. Right here. CNN Chile confirms that Chile is investigating the illegal capture of civilian Gonzalo Lira by Ukrainian neo-Nazi Azov forces in Kharkov, Ukraine. The foreign ministry, relatives of a Chilean in Ukraine, have not heard from him since 15 April. Okay? So this was broken 3 hours ago. So, no, he's not okay. He's not okay, and he hasn't been found, and nobody who knows him is coming out and saying they've been in communication with him. Furthermore, there was internet connectivity issues there, but there are other YouTubers, Twitterers, etc., that are shooting from there, and the internet there is fine now, and he has not reported back in more than 48 hours. So on top of that, you have Ukrainian forces bragging about torturing him, capturing him, beheading him on camera, etc., etc. Like I said, guys, this is a developing story. We will get into it. The dude is American. Waste Chile investigating an automatic. I don't know what did you mean to say, Alden? What did you mean to say about? I don't know what you mean by that. Okay, so that's all we have, guys. Gonzalo's missing. Nobody knows where he is. Ukrainians are bragging about killing him. And again, this we already talked about this with Ukraine. This is what happens when you arm, Nazis. When you arm people with horrible ideologies, there is no way to get this to get this genie back in the box, as I've consistently been saying. Blaster says George Galloway was supposed to have Gonzalo on his show yesterday, and apparently he couldn't get in contact with him, so the guy is full of crap. Yeah, I mean, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but I wanted to make sure that, you know, everybody heard from all sides, because you know how I get down. This is not an echo chamber. We've got to do our due diligence, okay? So it's very, very important. Furthermore, here is Galloway. Here's George Galloway, the person who supposedly spoke. Guys, I'm doing all this in real time. When I edit the video, it'll be a lot prettier and streamlined. But here is George. Here's George Galloway talking about Gonzalo. Okay. Chile, not Chile. Okay. I'm gonna get the picture up for you guys so that you guys can see, because George Gallo recently tweeted about this situation. Terrible situation, guys. Honestly, here's George Galloway, the person who supposedly saw or spoke to Gonzalo recently. This is a tweet that is 53 minutes old, guys. This is a tweet that's 53 minutes old, so it's right off the presses. It's on the bleeding edge, as my one of my old bosses used to say. Vinny, this is a bleeding edge report. Okay, so here it is. And again, guys, if you're a praying person, send them up for the homie, because it is not looking good. So here's George Galloway. He retweeted this. Really sorry to say this, but he's most likely gone now. And that's Alexei B. That's the guy that we talked about earlier. He's got that guy with the arm up. His call sign is Chile. And Alexei is bragging that Chile is the one that beheaded Gonzalo Lira. Okay? So the guy that said, oh, we talked to him a couple hours ago, he's fine. No, George Galloway retweeted 53 minutes ago that Gonzalo is most likely gone. Okay? Really horrible situation. But again, what do you expect from a country who nationalized their media to, quote, unify it? Look, guys, the reason I'm doing this report is simply to say, you have got to figure out what side you're on. If you want to be on the side of a country that does this to people, go for it. If you want to pretend, like Brent said, that it's just good guys, these are just good guys, and the Russians are just horrible, then go for it. I'm going to read you guys this article about how the Ukrainian government and elements in Ukraine deal with dissenters. Here we go. And guys, please be cautioned. Some of this stuff is gonna get graphic, and you know, at this point I really can't avoid it. Okay, but here we go. This is from the Gray Zone, 17 April. One less traitor. Zelensky oversees campaign of assassination, kidnapping, and torture of political opposition. Now, again, I'm going to disagree from the jump and say that Zelensky is a captured, compromised asset now of the far right Nazi ultranationalist faction in Ukraine. I do not believe that this is Zelensky's policy as a volunteer. I believe he is forced to do this stuff. So that's my disagreement with the premise of this article, but let's continue. While claiming to defend democracy, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky has outlawed his opposition, ordered his rivals' arrests, and presided over the disappearance and assassination of dissidents across the country. That was dated 17 April. I don't know if Gonzalo is going to be mentioned in this particular article. Let me see. Oh, well, I don't think Gonzalo is mentioned in this article. Zelensky stated, right now, the destiny of our country is being decided. The destiny of our people, whether Ukrainians will be free, whether they'll be able to preserve their democracy. U.S. corporate media has responded by showering Zelensky with fawning press, driving a campaign of his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize and inspiring a flamboyant musical tribute to himself and the Ukrainian military during the 2022 Grammy Awards on April 3rd. Holy smokes. Western media has looked the other way, however, as Zelensky and top officials in administration have sanctioned a campaign of kidnapping, torture, and assassination of local Ukrainian lawmakers accused of collaborating with Russia. Several mayors and other Ukrainian officials have been killed since the outbreak of war, many reportedly by Ukrainian state agents after engaging in de-escalation talks with Russia. Remember, we talked about this. Denis Kyriev, he was assassinated by the SBU in order to stop the peace negotiations. There is one less traitor in Ukraine, Internal Affairs Ministry advisor Anton Goroshenko stated in an endorsement of the murder of a Ukrainian mayor accused of collaborating with Russia. Zelensky has further exploited the atmosphere of war to outlaw an array of opposition parties, none of the far-right Nazi parties though, and order the arrest of his leading rivals. His authoritarian decrees have triggered the disappearances, torture, and even murder of an array of human rights activists, communist and leftist organizers, journalists, and government officials accused of pro-Russia sympathies. Do you see how this Russophobic language that we've all been inundated with is so dangerous? So now all you have to do is accuse someone of collaborating with Russia, and we can literally end your life. The Ukrainian SBU Security Services has served as the enforcement arm of the officially authorized campaign of repression. With training from the CIA and close coordination with Ukraine's state-backed neo-Nazi paramilitaries, the SBU has spent weeks filling its vast archipelago of torture dungeons with political dissidents. On the battlefield, meanwhile, the Ukrainian military has engaged in a series of atrocities against captured Russian troops and proudly exhibited its sadistic acts on social media. Here, too, the perpetrators of human rights abuses appear to receive their approval from the upper echelons of Ukrainian leadership. And again, for the most part, these people are not banned. The dude that was bragging about beheading Gonzalo still has a Twitter account. And by the way, that guy participated in a videotape beheading in 2007. He has an active Twitter account. While Zelensky spouts bromides about the defense of democracy before worshipful Western audiences, he's using the war as a theater for enacting a blood-drenched purge of political rivals, dissidents, and critics. I just think this is so unfair to Zelensky. I do not believe that Zelensky is behind this. We've already seen that Zelensky confronted Azov face-to-face about enacting peace in the Donbass region, but he is now being they threatened to murder him. So I believe he is now a compromised asset. Now, a person could say, well, you should give your life for your country. You're a coward. In that respect, I agree, but they're making it sound like this is coming from Zelensky, and I do not believe, based on the little evidence that we have, that this is actually coming from Zelensky. We continue. The war here's Al. Al, God bless you, brother. I expect the American government to investigate the kidnapping and potential murder of an American citizen born in Burbank, California, not the Chilean government. Al, that would only happen if the American government cares and wants to bring attention to the fact that one of our citizens has been kidnapped and tortured and murdered. But if that does not go with the U.S.'s agenda to demonize Russia and sanctify Ukraine, then we're not going to pursue it. So I know that that's what you would expect. But maybe now, Al, you can see that our country has different priorities than what you would expect to happen. We continue. The war is being used to kidnap, imprison, and even kill opposition members who express themselves critical of the government. A left-wing activist beaten and persecuted by Ukraine security services commented on April. We must all fear for our freedom and for our lives. You know, when the Ukrainians nationalized their media, I had a lot of people saying, oh, that's just common wartime practice. No, it's not. Not in the Western world in the last 50 years. We've been in jihad for 20 years. We didn't nationalize the media. The folks in UK and Australia didn't nationalize the media. It is not normal to nationalize the media in times of war. Only despotic countries do that. Only countries ruled by tyrannical overlords do that. But we look the other way because we've been programmed to think that the Ukrainians are good and the Russians are evil. So when the Russians do that to political prisoners, Vin, don't you see what the Russians are doing? Yes, Vladimir Putin's a bad guy. He's horrible. He's Dr. Evil. We've already established that. But are you going to look at the fact that Ukraine is doing the exact same thing? Oh, no. Let's come up with some excuse and be inconsistent and say it's whataboutism and yada, yada, yada. Okay, great. And now you have a country where people are being kidnapped for putting out bad tweets. When a U.S.-backed government seized power in Kiev following the Euromaidan regime change operation in 2013 and 14, Ukraine's government embarked on a nationwide purge of political elements deemed pro-Russian or insufficiently nationalistic. The passage of decommunization, please note, this is 2013 and 14 prior to any Russian, quote, invasion. So please stop using the Russian invasion to justify every horrible thing that these Ukrainians do to their own people, by the way. Decommunization laws by the Ukrainian parliament further ease the prosecution of leftist elements and the prosecution of activists for political speech. The post-Maidan regime has focused its wrath on Ukrainians who have advocated for peace settlement with pro-Russian separatists in the east, in the country's east, that's the Donbass region, those who have documented human rights abuses by the Ukrainian military and members of communist organizations. Remember, it was the left-wing socialist communist organizations that got de-seated in the parliament, so that any voice of peace at the legislative level in Ukraine has effectively been silenced, dear listener. So any opposition by common people, which is media, silence. We've nationalized the media. Anybody at the legislative level who can go against us and this bloodlust and war, we're going to de-seat them. And all of us look the other way. The Ukrainian Security Service, known as the SBU, has served as the main enforcer of the post-Maidan government's campaign of domestic political repression. Pro-Western monitors, including the United Nations Office of the High Commission and Human Rights Watch, have accused the SBU of systemically torturing political opponents and Ukrainian dissidents with near total immunity. The United Nations Office of Human Rights, the United Nations Office of the High Commission in 2016 said that arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, torture, and ill treatment of such conflict-related detainees were common practice of SBU, a former Kharkiv SBU officer explained. For the SBU, the law virtually does not exist, as everything that is illegal can either be classified or explaining by referring to state necessity. Dear listener, in 2016, the United Nations stated explicitly that these folks are arbitrarily holding people for detention, enforced disappearances, torture, and ill treatment of conflict-related detainees. This is prior to any invasion. This is who they were. Yevhen Karas, the founder of the infamous neo-Nazi C-14 unit, has detailed the close relationship his gang and other extreme right factions have enjoyed with the SBU. The SBU informs not only us, but also Azov, the right sector, and so on. Karas boasted in a 2017 interview. So the SBU is a military wing of Azov and all the rest of these, as far as targeted assassinations, detaining folks, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that is what's been going on. That's what's been going on, dear listener. Since Russia launched its military operation inside Ukraine, the SBU has hunted down local officials that decided to accept humanitarian supplies from Russia or negotiated with Russian forces to arrange corridors for civilian evacuations. Please note, the SBU has hunted down local officials that decided to accept humanitarian supplies from Russia. That would go to Ukrainian civilians. They were executed for doing so. On March 1, for example, Volodymyr Strok, the mayor of the eastern city of Crimea in the Ukrainian-controlled side of Lugansk, was kidnapped by men in military uniform, according to his wife, and shot in the heart. On March 3rd, pictures of Strok's visibly tortured body appeared. A day before his murder, Strok had reportedly urged his Ukrainian colleagues to negotiate with pro-Russian officials. This is what we consistently see. You have elements in Ukraine that are desperate for peace, that want peace, that are doing everything possible to promote peace. They end up missing or dead. We saw this with Zelensky. Zelensky tried his hardest to get these people to follow the Minsk Accords, and they threatened to murder him. Why are we not hearing about Bucha anymore? Remember there was a massacre in Bucha? There were human rights atrocities in Bucha? How come we're not hearing about Bucha anymore? Is it because on the 31st of March, they went up and down the street saying that they were going to be a clearing operation to clear the area of saboteurs and collaborators with Russia? Then a whole bunch of dead bodies appeared, dear listener. Do what you will with that. Do what you will with that. Anton Garashenko, an advisor to Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs, celebrated the mayor's murder, declaring on his Telegram page, this guy is an advisor to the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs. Unbelievable. He says, there is one less traitor in Ukraine. The mayor of Crimea in Lugansk region, former deputy of Lugansk parliament, was found killed. According to Garashenko, Strok had been judged by the Court of the People's Tribunal. And they've got a picture of his body there, which I am not going to show because I do not show war porn, but it's his dead body, and yes, he was absolutely tortured. Ukrainian official therefore delivered a chilling message to anyone choosing to seek cooperation with Russia. Do so and lose your life. On March 7th, the mayor of Gostomel, Yuri Prilipico, was also found murdered. Prilipico had reportedly entered into negotiation with the Russian military to organize a humanitarian corridor for the evacuation of his city's residents, a red line for Ukrainian ultranationalists who had long been in conflict with the mayor's office. Note, this man was negotiating with the with Russia to create a humanitarian evacuation corridor where Ukrainian civilians could escape the jihad. I'm really upset about this because this hurts Ukrainian civilians. I do not feel bad for the mayor, and I don't feel bad for Prilipico, because the fact of the matter is, when you become a leader, your job is to lay your life down for your people. So you take that job, that's what you're supposed to do. I'm the man of this house. I tell my kids all the time, somebody comes to the door, I'm going down there. Somebody's got to die. The leader always needs to die. We just celebrated Easter. If you're the leader, you're going to die. That's how it is. So respect to those mayors and such that died. They knew they were risking their lives. I don't feel bad for them. They died an honorable death. My problem, dear listener, is the civilians. The civilians who voted for Zelensky to bring them peace and who want desperately to have some peace. And now you've got this war, and the Russians are like, okay, let's talk. Let's negotiate how to get your civilians out of there. But you know what happened? These people, these Nazis, they want dead Ukrainians. We know they want dead Ukrainians. These are the same people who set up howitzers by kindergartens, get confronted by kindergarten teachers. They set up howitzers by malls. They went to Mariupol, and they set up their command base in a hospital. Because they know that it puts Russia in an insane situation, and they're going to be able to parade a bunch of Ukrainian dead people so they can get more weapons from us, guys. That's what's happening. How are we supporting this? On March 24th, Gennady Mastagora, the mayor of Kupiansk in northern Ukraine, released a video appealing to President Volodymyr Zelensky and his administration for the release of his daughter, who had been held hostage by agents of the Ukrainian SBU intelligence agency. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. They got this dude's daughter. Dear residents of Ukraine, his daughter, Daria Gennadovna Mastagora, is missing. She was born in the year 2002. They kidnapped this guy's daughter, the SBU, in Ukraine. They kidnapped this guy's daughter. Then there was the murder of Denis Kyriev. There you go. Okay, so somebody else is talking about it. There was the murder of Denis Kyriev, a top member of the Ukrainian negotiating team who was killed in broad daylight in Kiev after the first round of talks with Russia. Kyriev was subsequently accused in local Ukrainian media of treason. So Denis Kyriev was an official. He was part of the Ukrainian government, and his stance was, we need to negotiate with Russia and get out of this war as soon as possible. They executed him in broad daylight. The SBU did. These people, it doesn't matter if you're the mayor, if you're on the negotiating team, if you're on Twitter, if they can get you, they will get you. These people want war, and that is all they want, and that is the side that our country is taking. I cannot believe that people are justifying this shit. Russia is sitting there saying, okay, fine, we're going to kill all of you, but okay, let's take out your civilians. Let's negotiate a corridor for when you could do this. By the way, I don't know any of you if you know anything about tactics, but that obviously puts Russia at a disadvantage. Anytime you create a corridor that lets civilians out, you're creating a tactical disadvantage to yourself, because people who are militants can front as if they're civilians, and then you can have a transport portal back and forth, get out civilians, etc. You're injured, etc., or smuggle in arms, etc., etc. You're supposed to completely cut off a city and not let anyone in or out. This is a modern thing where you can negotiate to get the people out of there. But the Russians were willing to do that, but the Nazis were not. Because they need human dead civilians in Ukraine so that you and I can pressure our government to spend more billions, initiate a no-fly zone, all types of craziness. President Volodymyr Zelensky's statement that there would be consequences for collaborators indicates that the atrocities have been sanctioned by the highest levels of government. There it is. And again, I don't believe that Zelensky is behind this, but I mean, he is participating. There will be problems for cooperation with them or with the occupiers directly. This is the last warning. There will be consequences for working with the collaborating with them. This is your last warning. I do not believe that this is coming from Zelensky's heart. This is coming from a guy, in my opinion, who is being threatened to be murdered by Nazis. Now, you could say, well, Vin, you said that he was the leader. The leader should die for his people. I agree. At minimum, we can accuse him of cowardice. He's a coward. I agree. But this is not coming from him, and I think it's a mistake. I'm not saying this necessarily to defend Zelensky. What I'm saying is, we need to make sure that we're clear who the actual bad guy is and which group of people are perpetuating the bloodshed of innocent people. So you guys are right. He's a leader. He's ultimately responsible. The buck stops with him. And at minimum, he's a coward. The reason that I'm making the dichotomy between him and the Nazis is to say, but he is not the problem. If Zelensky died tomorrow and they set somebody in there who was a man who would be willing to die for his people, he would be dead. And they would get somebody else. That's not the problem. If we got rid of Azov and SBU, which I keep hearing, they're just a small group, Vin. Well, if we got rid of those people, then we would have peace tomorrow. That's the difference. We continue. As of today, 11 mayors from various towns in Ukraine are missing. Western media outlets have been following the Kiev line without exception, claiming that all mayors have been arrested by the Russian military. The Russian Ministry of Defense has denied the charge, however, and little evidence exists to corroborate Kiev's line about the missing mayors. When war erupted with Russia this February, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a series of decrees following formalizing Kiev's campaign against political opposition, etc., etc. Next, on April 12th, Zelensky announced the arrest of his principal political rival, Viktor Medvedchuk, of Ukraine's SBU by Ukraine's SBU security services. Many on Telegram channels are suspecting that the SBU has held Medvedchuk in a prison basement for weeks and publish the photos now to distract from Ukraine's losses on the battlefield. No way to know. Here's his face, clearly bruised, apparently a result of beatings from the SBU goons. Don't expect any questions about this image to appear on the pages of the New York Times, etc., etc., etc. The founder of the second largest party in Ukraine, the now illegal Patriots for Life, Medvedchuk, is a de facto representative of the country's ethnic Russian population. Though Patriots for Life is regarded as pro-Russia in part because of his close relations with Putin, the new chairman of the party has condemned Russia's aggression against Ukraine. That doesn't matter. All right. Sorry about that one, guys. Since Russian troops entered Ukraine on February 24th, Ukraine's SBU security service has been on a rampage against any and all iterations of eternal political opposition. Leftist Ukrainian activists have faced particularly harsh treatment, including kidnapping and torture. This March 3rd, in the city of Dnipro, SBU officers accompanied by Azov ultranationalists raided the home of activists with the Lifjiza, which would be the left organization, which has organized against social spending cuts and right-wing media propaganda. While one activist said the Azov member cut my hair off with a knife, the state security agents proceeded to torture her husband, Alexander, pressing a gun barrel to his head and forcing him to repeatedly belt out the nationalist salute, Slava Ukraine. Then they put bags over our heads, tied our hands with tape, and took us to the SBU building in a car. There they continued to interrogate us and threaten to cut off our ears. The Azov members and SBU agents recorded the torture session and published images of his bloodied face online. I'm not going to post it. He was jailed on the grounds of etc. I mean, it's just over and over again. And these folks are killing people, and I'm going to stop reading this article because there's too many pictures of dead people in this article, and I can't deal with it. Okay. All right. There you go, guys. So that's what we have. We are supporting a regime that kidnaps, tortures, murders people. Jackson Hinkle did a show on Gonzalo. Shout out to Jackson Hinkle. And our media, I'd be very surprised if our media is covering it. But it's very, very clear to me there is a very small but very militant element in Ukraine that does not want peace at all with Russia, wants a bunch of dead Ukrainian civilians, and are completely driven by far-right ultra-nationalist, white nationalist ideology. And I agree. You guys have changed my mind a bit. If I'm being consistent, you have to condemn Zelensky a bit for his cowardice, for not standing up for his folks. At the same time, I understand human nature. Who knows what they're doing with his family? Who knows who they have? But I think we've pretty much isolated who the real bad guys here are and why we can't have any peace in that region. As long as those folks are still around, and as long as our country is willing to arm them, and as long as our citizenry is willing to allow these atrocities to continue and to make excuses for these atrocities and to ignore these atrocities by saying that's whataboutism, this war is going to continue. And you know what? America is going to benefit. We're going to get all the gas patronage of Europe. We've got Finland and Sweden already wanting to be part of NATO, which means everybody's going to bow the knee to us. We'll always have a customer for weapons that we can sell, and on top of that, the Russians are going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and more isolated as this continues. So this benefits America exponentially. So there you go. Unbelievable stuff, guys. Much love to everybody. Love your neighbor, huh? In the meantime, love your neighbor, take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.